Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And oh my gosh, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things in the whole world today, podcasting. And we're going to be talking with an expert about why you need to be on podcasts. And we're going to help people who are going, oh my God, nobody'd ever listen to us, or it's really, really hard. All of those things. And so please join me in welcoming Molly Ruland to our program today. Welcome, Molly. How are you?
I am great, Deb. Your energy is infectious. So thank you so much for having me.
You know, and I don't drink caffeine. Can you imagine if I did right? I know. Well, let me tell folks a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. So Molly Ruland is the CEO and founder of Heartcast Media, and she leverages over 20 years of multimedia industry experience to trailblaze in podcast production. Based in D.C., but managing her global operations from Costa Rica, you can tell who, if you're looking, you can see the paradise there in the background. Molly's team has produced over 1,000 podcast episodes, including 7 top 10% global podcasts across various genres and industries. Her impressive client roster spans prestigious organizations like the Department of Health, DC government, and NATO, to dynamic entrepreneurs such as a dating coach. I saw that on there. Don't need one, but thought it looked very interesting. And former NBA players. Heartcast Media consistently delivers high-quality content that drives measurable business results for each project. So again, Molly, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Cool. Well, I always like to ask my guests, and I know it's very cliche, but people like hearing about it. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I grew up in a very, big Irish family growing up around communications and entertainment. And after having a multimedia company for 25 years, I transitioned into podcasting because I really like the idea of, I just got older and my interest changed a little bit. I used to manage 160 artists and had 3-story building and built recording studios. And then I sort of trimmed everything down to be more strategic and work with people that I'm passionate about working with and enjoy working with, to really hone in on podcast production, podcast growth, and podcast booking, very specifically to be a little bit more narrow. But I've always been obsessed with, pirate radio, and, our tagline is listening is the revolution. And I think that's really kind of at the core of everything I've done, to be honest.
Right. I love that. And obviously, I like podcasting. I've been doing it a really long time. I actually started by going into a radio station, and they recorded the programs that I did, and so then I eventually converted them to the first ones of the podcast. But to me, it's a fabulous way to reach people around the world when they want to be reached.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I mean, I'm a big radio listener. I still listen to the radio in the morning to get my news and things like that. But, so many people, they want to listen on their commute. They want to listen while they work out. They want to listen to whatever they want to listen to. And there are literally millions of podcasts. And so that's what I love about this, is it's a great way for people to get their voice and their message out there.
I agree. And I like the democratization of information and the fact that you can create something and publish it and get it out for free. There's expense in time and all of that, but RSS feeds are free for the most part.
Right.
So if you can get enough people to pay attention to you, what an amazing tool that is, where in the past, coming from PR, as right, you have to pay for all of that exposure. So it's really pretty incredible.
Right. And one of the things that people always ask me is, but it's got to be expensive, right? And I tell them no. I mean, there's 2 things you absolutely have to have. You have to have a good internet connection, and we were laughing about that earlier today because mine's been wonky, and a good mic.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is just and now there are hosting. Some people self-host, but those fees are really not a lot. So you can be doing this, for really, as you said, pretty inexpensively. We've all got the good mics. If we're working from home, even if it's just a couple days a week, we've got good internet. So
Mm-hmm.
why not start podcasting?
I agree. I think the more you invest in it, the better the podcast can become, right? With professional production, with growth options, like running ads behind it to get it in front of more people. But a lot of podcasts had started with just, somebody with their microphone in their basement, and the consistency, right? And the dedication to doing episodes and really honing in on your content and listening to the people that are listening to you.
Right. And I love that you mentioned consistency because I have people who say, I put out a podcast episode when I feel like it. What do you tell to people like that?
Well, I don't work with people like that, to be honest, because
Right.
it's when you own a business doing this, and I've even run into this, like the clients that pay for 12 podcast episodes versus the ones that are paying for 4 a month, right? There's a little more urgency involved in the 4 month. The ones that do 12, they might take a year and a half to record those episodes. They're not going to get the value that they would if they had recorded 12 in 4 months and then batch release them. That it's just not going to get, and then clients aren't happy with you. They feel like they didn't get the value, and you're like, but you gotta, you gotta do it a certain way, or it's not gonna be as interesting. It's not gonna be as impactful. It's not gonna get your ROI. So, and a lot happens, as we know. Look what happened in the last 72 hours. Waiting a month or a month and a half. I mean, if you look back to March of 2020, the whole world shut down in 3 weeks.
Yes.
3 weeks. Right? We went from living normal lives to wearing spacesuits to Costco in 3 weeks. You know what I mean? So, like, this idea that you can put a lot of time in between that content, but I think it also depends on what your podcast is and what the goal of the podcast is, right? If it's strictly business development and you don't care how many people download it and you don't necessarily need to build an audience, you're more concerned with the person across the table, then it doesn't matter as much. But if you're trying to build an audience, if you're trying to build a community, then it definitely matters.
Right. And it's funny, we do 2 a week and have for many, many years. So, I mean, that's a lot of content.
That's a lot.
That
Yeah.
I'm having to do. And, but they know that every Monday and every Thursday at 11 Eastern time, an episode goes live. Do they listen to it right then? Probably not.
Right.
But they look at, oh, that sounds interesting. Want to make sure I go back to that. They subscribe, all of those various things. And to me, if it's hit and miss, people are like, are they even still doing it? Must not be, so I'm not even going to look.
Right. Right. And, you have a great personality and a great voice. Like, I'm sure people really look forward to their little reprieve with you, right? It's an hour of not doom scrolling. It's an hour of not getting the latest atrocity via the news feed. Like, right? It's a nice break. And I'm sure people, like, there's a dog rescuer, Rocky Kanoka or something, I don't know. And he sits in shelters and he has a little lapel mic, and his voice is just, he seems like a genuinely nice fan, and he like calms my nervous system. And I look forward to his videos because it's something that brings me comfort and joy, and I like it. You know what I mean? And I think that you don't always realize what you do for other people in that same regard.
Right. And as we said, there's millions of podcasts. Anybody, if they have an interest that they are interested in, they're going to be able to find a podcast. And I don't care what it is, whether it's business or something for fun. And I mean, there really are. I went to Podfest. I like going to Podfest. Wasn't able to make it this year, but I was there at the time. And I was talking with this, as my mother would say, delightful young lady. And I said, "What is your podcast?" And she turned like 9 shades of red. And I thought, okay. Her podcast was actually of a sexual nature, shall we say. And she said, she said, I'm here to learn. She said, but I'm not going to tell you any more about it. I said, okay, I'm fine with that. It's not anything I wanted to listen to, so I didn't care. And they actually, she and her co-host used pseudonyms because she said I would probably lose my job. But it was an interest and, shall we say, a passion that she had, and they excuse me, they have an audience.
Yeah.
And so whatever it is, somebody wants to listen.
I agree. And I definitely have noticed when like I'm launching, I have a podcast myself, a political podcast. And when I put out a bunch of episodes right in a row, especially if I'm not waiting weekly, if I just crank them out, if I have them and I just release them as they come in, I get floods of traffic. Like people want to see more of that, right? Then,
Listen.
it definitely, it seems to make a real difference for sure.
Right. And from a business perspective, as we've been saying, it's a great way to get your message out there. And most businesses anymore are not just a brick and mortar. Even if they are, they can take orders from around the world, all sorts of things. And so it really is a great way to be reaching people.
Absolutely. And we sell podcasting a little bit differently than a lot of people when it comes to business development, where we sit down with our clients and we do a really in-depth, like ideal client profile, right? And then an ICP and an IGP. So the ideal client profile and an ideal guest profile. And we merge the two. So we ask them a lot of questions about their industry, what companies are doing well, what people are doing well, what awards people are winning, what things matter. And then we create a list in their sales navigator on LinkedIn of those exact targets. So if you have a parts company, we would set you up with big suppliers and distributors, right? And interview them. And then we produce the episode, and then we also do growth on it to make sure it gets lots of downloads. But what we tell our clients is that frees you up to then nurture that relationship. You just interviewed the CEO of a guy who owns a company.
That's a good business contact.
That could be really beneficial, and you've done nothing but give to him. You haven't tried to sell him on some sneaky thing. You've built a relationship because you're talking about something that you're both passionate about. And, at the end, they, if you've done it right, they should say, hey, this is really great, Molly. Let's get a meeting on the books. Or you follow up and you say, thanks for coming on the show, Tom. I'd love to, get that introduction you mentioned, or I'd love 10 minutes of your time, or would you join my board of directors, or whatever the thing is. But I think being really intentional, and I think something magical happens when you really focus on the guest, like you truly focus on the guest, the audience is more engaged. And I think too many people focus on the audience and what the audience wants, and they don't want that. They want you, right? So like, it's more interesting for me, somebody to listen to me having a down and dirty conversation about content marketing from two people that have been doing it for 20 years versus me creating a podcast about overcoming adversity. Because I think that's what people want. It's like, but that's not what I want to talk about. That's not what I'm passionate about. I overcome adversity every time I get out of my bed in the morning. You know what I mean? I don't want to spend any more time on that.
And most people are still just listening. I mean, yes, this goes on YouTube. There are various things, but most people are still listening. So they need to hear that passion. Otherwise, they switch, right?
Or even your quirkiness. Like, I was raised in an Irish Catholic family, so it's probably like a trauma response, but I like smart, like sarcastic people, quirky people. I like marketing people in general. I like people with high energy. I like people who are unapologetically themselves. And then, so when I'm listening to stuff, those are the people I like. And other people are like me. I think when people are trying to figure out, what do people want? Well, how do you behave?
Hey, if you were just talking to somebody at Starbucks, what would you be talking about?
Exactly.
And it's funny, I've been broadcasting, as we said, a very long time. And it started out, we focused on social media. That was when social really was first starting. So I had a good time with that. And then, there's really only so long you can talk about that. So I transitioned to business. But I have talked with some guests. They're still my favorite guests. And so maybe I don't know, maybe it's telling me I should do something different. And it wasn't really a business topic. I mean, I still kind of figure out a way to make it business. But, like I talked with a woman one time, and she actually is a friend of mine. I know her in the real world. And she's in Colorado. And her son, this was, when they first legalized marijuana. And he was way too young. and it caused brain damage. And he thought he could fly, and he couldn't. And she has turned that into her passion, right? If you're over 18, your brain is pretty much stopped forming, so have at it then. But if you're younger, no, right? And so, obviously that was a very personal story for her, especially because I knew her. I mean, we did sniffle and shed a few tears several times. But we also talked about, how do you market a book? How did you start your nonprofit? Things like that. And I tell people, it's my podcast. I can talk about what I want. And so that's the thing is, for me, I always want it to be like you and I are just sitting here having a conversation.
Well, you do a great job of it, for
Well,
sure.
thank you. Thank you. And for people who either are guests or are thinking about doing it or are doing it, really think about that. I tell people, I do not edit out the uhs, the ums, the you knows, because we're talking. Do I edit out things? Yes. I mean, we had a little piece in this that got edited out.
Right.
When we've had cats that have appeared, I leave that in. I think that's really funny.
Right.
Other things, but when you get so caught up in, oh, it must sound perfect, then it's no longer a conversation. I did an interview with someone one time, and we talked for an hour. And now, I know I'm a chatty Cathy, but she edited it down to 20 minutes.
Oh,
And it sounded so scripted and so stilted. I couldn't even listen to it. I mean, it was just, and so it's not going to be perfect. It is the conversation. We have our dramatic pauses. We giggle. We look at the cat. We do whatever.
right.
But that's what makes it real. People know I'm listening to or watching real people.
Yeah, there's this, I can't think of her name right now, but she's like a younger, really pretty blonde girl, and she's like on the liberal side of things, and she's a content creator. And she has one of those like blue healer dogs. And so on her podcast, she's like sitting on her chair, and she's just throwing the toy for her dog over and over again, because it's like there's no point in fighting it. The dog's just gonna bark and drive you crazy. And I'm like, that is the realest thing I think I've ever seen on the internet, where she's got a nice microphone, she's having an intelligent conversation, but she's literally just throwing it for the dog every couple of minutes, and it's just part of the thing. And I'm like, you might not get away with that on a B2B podcast, so it might be a little bit distracting, especially if you're trying to woo that person as a potential client. But I like the realness of it, because I have 3 dogs. That's the most relatable thing I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. And like, I shut the door so that my cats don't come in and distract. But the funny thing is, but they don't sit out there. I mean, a lot of times you can hear the cat at the door. Mine, and I'm pretty sure that it's because I have a headpiece, right, and an earpiece, and so they're only hearing my side of the conversation. And I'm pretty sure my cats are out there going, "Oh, crazy lady's talking to herself again." But it is about making it real, and whether we're talking about, here's the next marketing tip, or something, that's much more serious and earth-shattering, maybe is the way to put it. I do a lot of podcasts. I'm a 3-time cancer survivor, so I do a lot of interviews
Yeah.
for that.
Wow.
And, but we still laugh our way through.
You have to, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. And so for people who are thinking, okay, I want to do this, don't get caught. I mean, I've had people say, well, you must record 20 episodes before you ever launch. You must do that. You must start. That's what I tell people, and then figure it out from there. Do I go back and listen to my podcast from years ago? Oh God, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's just, you got to decide to do it, and then just do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot of rules, right? There's a lot of people who tell you what you should and shouldn't do. I think the best thing anybody could do is, even with somebody like me or somebody else in your podcast community, do a strategy session with them. Get really clear, and then go do it yourself.
Why are you doing it?
Right. And it's not just like the name and that's like of course that matters, but like, what is the goal? What are the things you're going to talk about? Who are you going to interview? Getting a plan for it, so you're really firm in what it is that you're doing. I think that's the best thing somebody could do, especially if they want to like DIY it. pay a little bit of money to do a story, or maybe somebody in your podcast meetup community or somebody would be willing to do that, right? To sit down.
Right.
But especially if it's for business, I would definitely do a strategy session with somebody to make sure that like you're not directed, like you don't want people to know you for your podcast and then be like, wait, you're a real estate agent? Like you don't want it to be so far out of the realm that like you're actively working against your own business in a sense because no one even realizes that you do that. It's like, well, if you're gonna get some recognition, you might as well hedge your bets and get it in all places. But I think just getting clear on what it is, like what do you want to talk about? And it's always good to have a couple in the can, but in my experience with creating content, especially if you're relying on other people or if you're doing interviews, of course, have a few of them. But in my experience, the content that you just record and is really raw and like in the moment and based on what's going on is the stuff that does better.
Right. I know. I always say I really should, hit the record button at the very start because it's our little pre-chat where we have so much fun getting to know each other. And I mean, there are a lot of people that do a true pre-chat.
Right.
That's entirely up to you. I'm talking business. Not like I need to get to know, a ton of detail about you. We do a little 10-minute pre-chat. But like I said, I do interviews about inspiration, motivation, all those various things. And so I frequently do pre-chats with the hosts, and I'm more than happy to do that. And I do have somebody that I work with who pitches me. But it's really funny. I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years. And I've had 2 who said nope. You know, and it was really funny because the first one, I sent an email to my booker and I said, she's going to tell you no. I mean, I don't even think I'd taken my headset off. We just did not hit it off. I mean,
Sometimes oil and water, man.
And then there was another time where I thought we hit it off. We actually had the interview scheduled, and an hour or so before, she sends me a note and she said, I've changed my mind.
Well, that's just bad form.
Well, and it was there were various reasons why, but of course my thought was, well, you're not my people. So this would have not gone well.
Exactly. Especially, I was booked for an interview recently and I drove from the coast 3 hours to be in my home studio to record it. And he canceled 27 minutes beforehand. And I said, I drove 3 hours yesterday to be here in my studio for this. I will not be rescheduling because you're not my people. I don't care if you're the biggest, I don't care. If you cancel 27 minutes for a meeting, understood. But a recording where you expect me to show up like having brushed my hair and actually taking my shower,
Putting a shirt on him.
like put the war paint on, I got my microphone out, and show me you're not my people. It's totally okay.
Yeah.
It's totally okay.
And things happen. I mean, we were chatting before. I did not have internet for probably 5 hours today. And an hour before, I thought, okay, because I I thought, I hate to do this. And it came on right before an hour before. And,
Right.
but like 3 hours before, I was thinking, should I reschedule? Should I reschedule? Should I reschedule? And, they kept giving me updates and saying it will be on. And I thought, okay, fingers, toes, and eyes crossed. But,
Nice.
and the thing is, if you have to reschedule for whatever reason, just be honest. Oh my God, this big client meeting came up and the dog died. I had a guest who passed away. Yeah.
That's unreasonable.
That was. And now it was he and his wife who were supposed to be the guests.
Oh no.
And God bless her. She said, I can do it in a couple days. I said, no.
No, come on, mama. Yeah.
And we rescheduled for like a month later. I said, this is and things happen from the guest perspective too. I mean, and just be honest. Even if it's, oh my God, I really hate to do this. We're supposed to do this in 5 minutes. I can't. Just let them know. It's just because as these are business opportunities, you never know. It might be your best buddy that you're meeting. All these various things, and so just be honest with them.
I always say that too, but we really talk a lot about relationships in podcasting. And so I think like when you have your own podcast, you're forming relationships with other people. And then when you go on other people's podcasts, you get to form new relationships with people. And it's always about that and not necessarily who's listening.
Right.
And I always say that too. You never know. You might, I mean, I've interviewed people that I'm good friends with now. And I go to Podfest too. You never know. We might hang out next time. Like it's a very small world. It really is. And so I value each one of those conversations as a relationship because that's really what like moves the needle. And I think we're in this society where it's like everything has to go viral or be big numbers. And that's just not the reality of life. Most people's businesses would be tremendously impacted in a positive way by 2 new clients a month.
Right. Yeah.
And I
so
don't
if you're
need 20.
aiming for 2,000, what happens if you got them, right? Yoicks.
It could kneecap you significantly. Like I couldn't handle 2,000. I couldn't handle 200 new clients. I couldn't handle 20 new clients this month. It would not be good for the business. So I think people, if you kind of break it down more, just focus on the relationship, focus on showing up, hanging out with Deb, tagging you on LinkedIn when it comes out, share, just maybe introducing other people that would be good for your podcast or people that you would be good on their podcast, just nurturing the relationship. I think that's like, people don't understand that so much business and so much of your life is really beholden to like the relationships you carry.
Right. Right. And the other thing about that is people talk, right? You said it's a small world. We get pitches, we get probably 5 a day. I mean, I've been on the air a long time and we've got a really popular podcast. And so I get probably 5 pitches a day. I very rarely now do my own pitch and say, hey, would you come on? I don't need to.
Right. You need to, yeah.
But it's so funny because when, if I have canceled to somebody, I know that booker is going to think twice before sending me somebody else.
Totally.
And more importantly, if that booker is rude or does something, then I'm never going to pay attention to him again. We had one who, now I am pretty sure that it was AI that was doing this and not, and so watch that, folks, because
there's a lot of that going around.
Yeah. And about the 6th time in, maybe 2 weeks, this person contacted me. Hey, did you hear? Did you respond? And like the first 3 times I responded and I said, dude, I've responded to you already. I mean, the first time I was really polite. The third time I was not. And then I told my producer, I have blocked him from my email. You need to block him also. We're not ever going to take anybody he sends. And, and whether it was AI, whether he was so busy, he wasn't paying attention, any of that, no. I don't have time to be dealing with that. And then of course my thought is, what's going to happen when he actually, when I need the guest information, things like that. So just remember that it is a professional relationship, even if you're talking about dog grooming or food or whatever it is. It's still, maintain it as a professional relationship.
Well, I've got one for you. One time we were producing, I know it's a good one. We were producing a podcast episode for a client and it was their guest. And the guy's audio was terrible. It was just really bad. And he's like, hold on a second, I have to spit. And we were like, what? And he was at the dentist.
Oh no.
I think my couch cushions.
Something just blew away.
This was like in the monsoon out there. But yeah, he was at the dentist and he said, hang on, I have to. That's how little he cared, right, about showing up for, our client who paid a lot of money for us to produce that episode too. I think we gave him a credit because I was like, that's just absurd and it's not your fault.
Oh yeah.
But you'd be amazed how often stuff like that happens.
Oh yeah. I had a guy one time, I was interviewing him and I could hear this noise. I mean, noise. And I finally, just a couple minutes into it, I said, what is that? And he said, oh, I'm sitting on my deck and they're cutting down trees. I said, you need to go inside or we need to reschedule.
Right.
And now I did do one time and she cleared it with me in advance. It was, and I think it was, work from anywhere type of conversation. And she was poolside. And you could hear the kids playing, but it was a little bit. I mean, there wasn't, every once in a while, and so that was okay because it played into the theme of the thing. But and she told me, she said, if you don't want me to do this, this is perfectly fine. But nobody came up and offered her a drink or mommy or anything like that. I mean, it was just kind of a cute thing. And if you are a guest, please, 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 please follow the instructions from whoever's contacting you from the podcast. We've got a form that I send, or that Kim sends, and it's pretty simple. This is what we need from you, yada, yada, yada. And, and I mean, we have people who send us extra. That's fine, but, and I give a deadline too. I need it by this so that, especially if they've sent a book, right? Because I need to have a chance to do that. But I had a booker one time who, and one of the things I always ask is, what are 3 to 5 topics you want to discuss, right?
Yeah.
You gave me, I must have said more than that because you gave me 6. But anyhow, so because I want to make sure that we cover at least part of why you want to be on the program. And her response was, it's your responsibility to figure it out.
Off of their head.
Well, and, he was an interesting guest, and I was looking forward to talking to him. So I thought, and I still do my research, right? I look on LinkedIn, I look on their websites, all of those various things. So I was able to get enough for the interview. But after we were done, I said, can I talk to you about something? And he said, yeah. And I said, how new to this are you? And he said, very new. I've only been doing it a month or so. I said, how long have you been working with the booker? Oh, about the same period of time. Are you happy with the number of interviews she's getting for you? And he kind of paused. I said, I'm not pitching you anything. I just am curious. And he said, well, no, I really did think I'd be getting more interviews. And I said, well, I have to tell you why. And so I tattled. And he, of course, fired her. And I got a phone call from her. Not apologetic. She was mad. And I said, oh, honey, now you've annoyed me. And I'm going to tell other people, don't work with this person.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just, it's like, it's an hour and a half, couple hours out of my time.
Right.
Follow the instructions. It's not hard.
I
And most
agree.
people have cut and paste, right? They've got the bio, they've got the one sheet. Okay, that's fine. But
Right.
yeah, don't say it's your responsibility as the host to do this, or say, and I have had people who've said, well, we sent the website. Okay, that's not what I want.
That's not what I want. Well, we pitched you on a few of our clients and me, and you saw we make really beautiful in-depth media kits
Yes.
to answer all of those questions, topics you're ready to cover, questions you're ready to answer, notable appearances, all your links, high-res pictures. Our goal is to make it as easy as
Yes.
possible for you, the host, to say yes and to grease the wheels so that everybody is happy, and that's our job. So I find that wild that an agency would say that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But and as the guest, do a bit of research. Now, I'm not saying listen to their last 20 episodes. Listen to 5 minutes of one. I mean, get a little idea of what they're like. And now I will tell you, when I get a pitch from somebody that says, "Oh my gosh, I loved your interview with Molly," actually, I like it. I'm like, okay, they at least took a little bit of time with this as opposed to just cut and paste.
If they really did, but what I find is because we're really good at SEO, right? And so we just did a bunch of SEO on our podcast production services, and our setup is called The Works, and every client starts with The Works, and that's like the building everything out.
Yeah.
But it's a one-time fee. It's not cheap. It's something I invoice for. I know every single person who's ever bought it, right? Because of our SEO efforts, 3 times a week now, I'm getting emails saying, I've been using your service, The Works, for a few months now, and I'm a big fan.
Fill in the blank.
And it's like, let's not start this conversation with a lie. And so every time somebody says I'm a big fan, I just assume they're lying.
Yeah. At least put the next sentence and say, when she talked about X.
Something really relevant.
Something where I know you listened to 5 minutes worth.
Exactly. Because these AI agents can do that now. They can search terms and keywords and fake the funk for you.
Neat.
So that's our actual initial pitch is very short. because I don't want it to appear like an AI written thing. I'm like, hey, real person here. Are you open to guests? If so, what do you want? And most people go, thank you so much for just asking me and not sending me a bunch of crap that I didn't ask for or is not relevant to the show. Because sometimes too, people's podcast description isn't updated. And so like their episodes don't really match what like the official, just because they wrote it 2 years ago or a year ago or when they first started, and things have evolved. And so you can't always go by like what's publicly available. So we always ask the host, what are you looking for? And then we're only going to send you those people. And a lot of times we go, great, we don't have any of those people right now, but when we do, we'll let you know. And it's so funny because the hosts always go, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for not like just sending me things.
And then you're also the perfect example of now I love my producer. We get most of the month done pretty far in advance, right? So then I've got, a couple weeks where I'm not doing much. But every once in a while, we have a hole. And, and I've got a handful of people who I know I can contact and say,
Right.
I've had somebody that canceled. I need an interview right now. What have you got? And you might not have anybody, especially if I say I need somebody who's going to talk about X. You might not, but it never hurts to ask. And it's really funny, the whole pitch process, and the acceptance. When I first started, of course, I had to, hey, I've got this podcast. Would you like to be on it? In all this time, I've only been turned down twice. And one was really funny. He said, I can't talk. It's an hour. I can't talk that long. And I said, well, I just saw you give a 45-minute presentation.
Which is way harder than just talking.
And he pushed back again. I thought, okay, he just doesn't want to do it. And so I went on. But then I had one time, and I pitched to this guy. And I was several years into it. So it was not, hey, I got this brand new podcast. Would you be a guest? It was, hey, I've got this podcast. It's on C-Suite Network, yada, yada, yada. And he sent me a very polite, hey, that sounds great. I would love to. Here's my assistant's information. Please contact her and she'll set it up. So I did, because I follow instructions. And she responded, he was being polite. Don't bother him again. Now, here's the funny thing. Several years later, he contacted me and said, I'd like to be a guest. And I told him no. Now, did I have to do that? No. But I also told him why. Was that, as my mother would have said, cutting off my nose to spite my face? Probably. But, and I
must be related, Deb. My mom would have said the same.
I know, could I have been the bigger person? Sure. But I wasn't. And I had fun with it. But, I think one of the things that is so fun about all of this is it also gives you skills that carry over into other parts of your business life. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Just being a good listener, just being a good listener is really important. I also think right now in this time that we're living in this timeline and this world that we're in, I think that it's really important to state who you are and what you believe in. And I think right now it's a little counterintuitive where a lot of people are really being very vanilla on LinkedIn and not stating how they believe. And I don't think that that's a time for that. I don't think that you need to define your business by your political beliefs, but I don't really think it's political anymore either. And so for me, I think, being comfortable as a woman, standing in my belief and being totally okay with whatever that comes with, which is not intuitive for women. We are silenced all the time.
Oh, yes.
By our own husbands, our own mothers, and like
whoever,
right? Everybody. And so I think finding that courage, what are you so afraid to lose in the first place, I think is really good, and it's really good character building. And I think that a lot of times we focus on the negative things that might happen, but really what happens is the people that align with you in the same way will be attracted to you, and the people that aren't will be repelled. And isn't that what we want anyway? I don't want to work with people who I find morally reprehensible. I can't even look them in the face, to be honest. But I don't want to spend time with them. I don't want to feel that way. I would much rather focus on the people that I do align with, build into them, support them, care about them, embrace that community. And I think that really just it enriches your personal life and your business life when you're really clear on who you are and who you want to work with.
Right. Yeah, I was working with a young lady one time on her LinkedIn profile, and she was just getting out of an advanced college degree program. And her LinkedIn picture, she had a T-shirt on, and it said "Proud Muslim." And, and she was from the Middle East. And so, and this was a class. I called her aside later. I'd never do anything in front of everybody. And I said, I want to talk to you about that. And she looked a little, I said, it's okay. It's okay. And one of the things she said, I told her, I said, I'm not a fan of a T-shirt. I mean, just in general, right?
Right.
And I said, but your message is going to turn some people off. And this young, very wise woman said, then I don't want to talk to him anyway. Right? I mean, and so that really was the thing was, set that up, whether it's your website, your LinkedIn profile, your Facebook, and don't be one thing here and one thing there.
Agreed.
It's not going to work. And so it is okay to say, this is what I stand for. And then be good with it. Now, like on social, I really don't do political posts, but that's just my preference. Am I likely to, click like or a heart or something on somebody's that I agree with? Sure. I'm not really big into doing that, but yeah, I mean, especially now when things are getting so polarized, I think it's okay to say, this is what it is. And maybe that's your podcast. I mean, you mentioned that, you've got your own podcast. You're going to have people on there that fit that podcast, because it's not going to be a fun podcast. Like the lady who turned me down.
Right.
I mean, we were going to be talking about cancer, and she
Right.
turned me down because I used the term warrior. I even have it tattooed on my arm. I am a cancer warrior. I have a tribe. Now, I get that some people might not like that because it's a triggering word. And she said, the young people in my demographic aren't going to like that. And I thought, lady, you're older than I am. So then I wasn't sure, but I thought it just would have not been a good fit.
It's okay. Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine. I mean, I was annoyed for maybe 5 minutes that I'd gotten up and put the nice shirt on and all of that stuff. But yeah, it was like, no, I'm good with this.
Deb, I love your honesty. I really do. I appreciate that. I mean, yeah, not everybody is for everybody, and that's okay. And I think in the past that I was never political either. I mean, I've owned One Love Massive and my current company for 25 years, and we don't do thoughts and prayers. We don't do happy anything from St. Patrick's Day to Hanukkah. We just don't touch it. Like, it just didn't exist. But I feel like the world has kind of changed a little bit, right? And whatever it might be, even if it's not political, I think just being really true to yourself and that messaging, and podcasting does help you do it because you can't fake the funk on a hour-long conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it goes back to what we were saying at the start. You need to think about what your podcast is for. Mine is 99% business focused.
Right.
That's pretty hard to kind of go off the rails on that. Now, I can, and about the only time where I've ever actually really turned people down is when I thought I can't quite figure out how I can get this to a business focus. And so that was okay. And I interviewed a gentleman, this would be less than 4 years ago. And we had to reschedule multiple times. He was in Kyiv. And I am pretty sure that when we did the interview, he was in a bunker. And I mean, that was wild. But we were talking business. I mean, it was just, but yeah, if your podcast is business focused, then figure it out. And what type of business? I mean, and all those various things. So that is where it's good to plan in advance. One of the things that I know you do with your company is you have branded podcast production. Tell us more about that. Is that the brand of what they're doing or more what you're doing?
Well, it's really more focused on like business podcasting. So like specifically having a podcast to boost your business.
Okay.
And so I was just gonna kind of say like, I have two podcasts. I have one called Camp Content, and I interview CMOs about content marketing, and that's my business podcast because I get them on my podcast. We talk about podcasts, and we talk. So it makes sense. At the end of the interview, they go, "Molly, tell me more about your rates and services. I think I have a couple clients for you." Right? Very, very intentional.
Go ding, 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 ding.
Right. And I go, perfect, great. And I think the best way to show people how you work is to show them how you work. And so they just experience what it's like to be on a podcast with me so they can feel confident that that's how I'm going to work with everybody else. Right.
Right.
My personal podcast is all politics. And those two things, they don't cross. Right. So like if somebody said, tell me about your podcast, I would never encourage them to listen to Camp Content unless you want to hear me being a comedian half the time, because it is relatively entertaining. But it's not a podcast that I'm like proud of. It doesn't represent me. I wouldn't say, oh, it's great. You know what I mean? It's great for the guest. We have a good time on it. But I don't think it's something that people are going to lose their minds over, The other podcast is really personal. And that is where I get to really be myself. And so maybe if people are like struggling between how do I get this personal thing to be a business podcast? Well, maybe you don't.
Right.
Maybe you can have two separate avenues for those things, right? Because, I figure, I live in Costa Rica. The podcast is called What Do We Do Next, And it's really, what do we do next? Because I don't think anybody knows. And calling our Congress people, I can't call Eleanor Holmes Norton anymore. I'm from D.C. It's one person. She's sick of me calling her office, frankly. So I wanted to do something else, right? But they don't overlap. And that's okay. They don't need to. One fills my pipeline, the other one fills my cup.
Right.
And they don't have to do both. And I think sometimes people, especially women, we get told, find your passion, create a business around it. That's not great advice.
Right.
Find a demand, create the supply, and then use that to fund the thing that you're passionate about.
And then you've got the passion.
They don't always have to intersect. You know what I mean? And a lot of times when you focus on it being your passion, you build something that's just there's no demand for.
Right. Or you wake up and you're like, what am I doing?
This isn't my passion anymore. Right. So I think being really clear about those things can be really helpful. So that way you don't feel like you have to silence yourself in one arena, but thinking long term, for me, the political podcast, I don't, I decided if I get any sponsors, I'm going to put it towards growing the podcast, not toward, I have no interest in monetizing it. I don't want to be a podcaster. I don't want to be known. I just wanted to use my resources. The business podcast is definitely a pipeline filler.
Right.
That's very intentional. I can measure the results, the ROI. I know if it's working or not. I know when I need to start it and stop it. And so I think being really clear on those two things can be really helpful.
Right. Well, oh my gosh, Molly, we have filled the hour. I think we've just scratched the surface. So we'll do this again because I think it's very important to, let people, in on maybe the behind the scenes. What all does this do? All sorts of things, and talk maybe new tech. That's always very interesting. And so would love to have you on again. But until then, tell us a little bit more about Heartcast Media and how can they find you and what are the services that you provide?
Amazing. Well, they can find me at heartcastmedia.com/friends because we're all friends now. We do podcast production, podcast booking, and podcast growth. And we also build websites. So, because everybody needs a new website. It's like candy in the checkout aisle. And we've gotten really good. I'm also kind of a firm believer that SEO and podcasting is like what you should put all your money into because it's like you're building relationships and then you're getting inbound. And I think that is far more effective than social media at this point. So those are kind of the pillars of what it is we do. But I'm always happy to get on a call with people and chat with them a little bit. You know what I mean? As long as it's not too extensive, I'll do some strategy calls with people and things like that. And then the podcast is What Do We Do Next? So if anybody wants to check that out, it's on all the platforms if you're feeling like getting a little political. But yeah, connect with me. You can always find me on LinkedIn, although I kind of avoid that platform quite a bit these days. But you can definitely get me on the website for sure.
I love it. I love it. Well, this really has been so much fun, and I can't wait until we chat again. Do you have any final thoughts you want to leave everyone with?
Love the ones you're with. Life is crazy right now. Love the people around you. Love them hard. Stay true to yourself and be safe.
I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having so much fun talking about all sorts of things, not just podcasting, with Molly Ruland. of Heartcast Media. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.